Good afternoon, sir, and welcome to this edition of Risk Management, Making It Real. Really appreciate you making time for us. Then we're going to start with a somewhat provocative question. Do you believe post-COVID there is greater acceptance towards need for better risk management at an executive leadership level? Is it more driven by recency factor, or do you expect this to be permanent versus being transient?
Thank you. Subhashis, I think the last 15 to 18 months have been a real game changer as far as risk is concerned. And at the outset, I can very much state that I am convinced that this is not transitional in nature. It is a permanent edifice of development of institutions and organizations and corporations, and of course, sovereigns as well, in recognizing what are the risks that we would encounter as we sort of make progress. In everyone's life, whether it was personal or professional, we have always sort of built our own risk mechanisms. And I think this is part of our own development from a child, a protection of what the parents provide to children and the risks that they sort of bring to the fore as children. And we all developed with those instincts of managing those risks. And I think if you sort of really move that analogy up and sort of say that the institutionalizing and the building it part of the DNA is what your parents taught you at that point of time, and it becomes instinctive that you believe in it, you sort of prepare for it, and you're almost sort of prepare your own children when your time comes to sort of pass them down. And that becomes part of your DNA. And I think it's the same element that the organizations will need to develop, institutionalize, and build it as part of their DNA, without which you will find that progress would not be predictable. And I think that's the big issue. This particular period of pandemic that we've seen was, we always used to hear of the avian flu or the swine flu or the Ebola or many other, or the Spanish flu that was historically sort of somewhere there in our history books. But we never really saw it that we would at time be facing this with the same intensity that perhaps many of those countries or geographies face. It was for the first time that this COVID-19 made world a level playing field in some ways. And everyone recognized at the same time the importance of what you just spoke about is risk management and preparing for risks. So I think this is, I would say, a game-changing event. If we do not pay heed to this, we would be doing this at our own peril.
Interesting perspective and analogies. So, you've got the benefit of seeing a banking industry for the longest time. One would like to believe that it's the industry which has got more mature risk practices. There have been more regulations in place, and therefore some kind of attributed to saying because there have been regulators, hence people have possibly done it better or right in banks. Two things. One, can regulation alone solve for it? How necessary are regulations? And two, therefore, if you were to have a word of advice for other industries? Are there learnings that they can take from what's worked well in the banking industry, financial services sector, that they could sort of look to build into their risk DNA?
Again, a very interesting question. Financial markets and banks, the very foundation of a bank is that they're in the business of taking risks. So that's what they specialize in. And evaluation of risk has been historically, as the banking system evolved right from its inception, this was the product that has got more and more refined over a period of time. And it has the benefit of the history that the banking system has seen over different economic cycles, over different geopolitical events, and of course, also other risks that the banking system or the financial system has faced globally. The 2008 crisis was, again, global financial crisis was really another element that, as you know, that despite being a very mature Western-dominated banking system, the impact of that, of what were the systemic risks that were building and yet not fully identified as to how they're going to impact the global financial markets, is one such example of where, despite the banking system being so evolved, as you sort of suggested, but yet there were lessons that even the banking system learned. So, and just to sort of cover that a little bit more, as to sometimes we don't learn our lessons and we don't sort of institutionalize as to what the learnings are. So post the global financial crisis, there was the Financial Stability Board that sort of went into all the kind of systemic risks and what needed to be done. A significant change in the way banks would identify risks, and also relooking at the regulatory architecture that provides the supervision and also continues to sort of guide the banks in terms of the risks and the metrics that would be available to them to see the intensity of the risks that are built. A lot of work was done, but yet we have seen, again, the banking industry going through some more challenges as they've moved along. So this is an evolving process. And I think even for the banks, it is a reminder that what we faced in 2020 and what we are sort of coming out of that, hopefully, fingers crossed, is what you and I have spoken about, that the risks, known unknowns and the unknown unknowns. And I keep repeating this because I definitely believe that if we don't start thinking about the unknown unknowns, those risks, and sort of start building risk mitigants or creating an infrastructure where we would have more resilience towards those kind of risks. I think that's really a great learning, and that's where organizations start building those. And as we've seen based on this last COVID-19 crisis, I think that's what will bring the better resilience in the system itself. So I would say that it's not that the banking system has come out with flying colors. We've also had to do a lot of self-learning. And here, one of the important elements that emerged from this is that while we looked at many other risks, the operational risk in dealing with a crisis like this was never really stress tested to the extent that we saw it over the last 15 to 18 months. So we've sort of seen enterprise risk, we've seen credit risk, market risks, but this was time that how well are we operationally geared to cater to our customers as this is an essential service, as much as healthcare, where that provides them the physical and protection of their health. But if there is no economic protection, it provides even more distress and, of course, challenges on even getting the right kind of healthcare. So dealing with that aspect has been a great learning for the banking system as well. And I'm very sure that this learning will help the banks to look at what the other risks that are there, the entire risks of cybersecurity, the technology risks, that the operational risks which have led to the further of digitalization in the banking system. So there are whole aspects of learnings that are there. And I'm quite sure that this will evolve further. As far as the other industries, I think it would be fair to say that many other industries also had prepared themselves to have very good risk management systems. It's the nature of this risk that we saw over the last 18 months had varying degrees of impact on certain sectors. So those sectors who got impacted really badly were actually coming out of a financial stress in this because the business got impacted. But the issues relating to people and how do you deal with the people who got impacted was universal. And I think for the first time, universally, organizations recognized that it is people first. What used to be earlier profitability first and other parameters first, but without people, you do not have an organization. And managing the risks which impact people, they're physically, they're emotionally, and from a point of view of their well-being, I think that element is sort of universal, and that will be almost a recognition that that aspect, the entire industry, whether it's financial or non-financial or manufacturing, will need to deal with. That's number one. And I think in all the other sectors of the industry, other than the financial, there would be also some learnings on the individual sectors, and those would be sector specific. Hospitality, leisure, travel. Each one has its own elements that they need to deal with. And I think there's a lot of research and a lot of work that still needs to be done. How do you sort of, at least whatever you can think through, how do you sort of create the mitigants for those risks, potential mitigants? And of course, from a business continuity perspective, what are those business continuity factors that you build in that there's no disruption in your business as you move forward?
Now, keep this out of India market context to ensure there is absolutely no controversy. But, some of the financial services and capital markets challenges that one has seen where risk management is more evolved has possibly been, again, without trying to pass an opinion, triggered by tone at the top. Some of the things that were not right were possibly, known to executive leadership. How critical, in your view, is that tone at the top in driving the right risk management culture?
Yeah, so as I was saying, that this is all the stakeholders of any institution require that risk management be an integral part of the tone setting that comes from the board and the leadership, and it sort of flows down. This is while we used to sort of look at business metrics as the measurement of performance, but now more and more the boards are looking at what are the risks inherent in those businesses, and how have we protected ourselves, or how are we anticipating and are fully ready to deal with those risks, so that there is sustainable growth over a longer period of time. And in every organization today, the risk management committee of the board is becoming more and more important. I always say that the audit committee looks at historical data. So whatever has happened, they're evaluating that and seeing how robust the organization based on statistics and financial information of the past. The risk management committee is actually looking at the future and sort of really evaluating how well the organization is positioned for the future. And if you're really looking at the aspect, what comes out from the risk management committee and then translates into what should be your business capacitization, it flows from what allows you from a risk, and then sort of you go for the business from there on. And it's not vice versa. So I would say that this is becoming an integral part of the board's responsibilities. And more, they would be thinking about this all the time and evaluating this and actually projecting well beyond what would be a normal time horizon and looking at all those risks. And there's the same thing flowing in from the regulators. The interaction with the regulators is now much more deeper and forward-looking. While they will spend a few minutes talking about the performance of the institution and how well we've done in the past, but I think what they're really looking at is how much are you future ready and future resilient? Because whatever water has flown under the bridge, that's history. But what they're concerned about is what does your future look like? And they need to make sure that you have actually identified all the risks and you're fully prepared. And created enough buffers for different kind of risks in an organization.
Some of the better leaders as well, who've been successful, would possibly say that they've built successful companies, large organizations, where risk management's kind of come intuitively to them. Because if I'm a leader, I'm anyway managing risks. How do you bring in a more structured risk management framework approach, make it more institutionalized versus intuitive? Any guidance around what you think companies can consider looking at?
There is certainly merit in people who have seen and managed risks over a period of time. As a risk manager of an institution, your experience does count because you've seen many kind of risks impacting organizations and how you have reacted to that. So there is a lot of weightage given to people with that kind of an experience. What is sort of evolving is that the complexity of the risks are changing very rapidly. So whatever I have seen in my extended experience in the financial markets over the last 38, 40 years, it's not necessary that I will probably see in my remainder part of engagement with the financial markets, similar kind of risks re-emerging. The manifestations or the nature of the risks are changing. This is like a typical virus of a COVID-19. It's sort of
mutants.
The mutants, and it keeps changing, and there are variants of this which are there. And I think this is what we need to be prepared for. So take, for example, we are using technology far more effectively. We're using, first of all, technology to develop and provide sustainability. We spoke about digitization, and we're moving from manual to digitization. and digital banking, digital payments, and all of that. But what you're doing is you're building a very strong and a large technology platform. And your dependency on that technology platform is enormous because everything is now running on that platform. While it's very great, it's absolutely wonderful that we've acquired those technology platforms from third party, because that's not what I built, that's what somebody else provides. But does my organization fully understand the elements in those, in that technology platform, which I'm now using and fully dependent upon? So earlier, if you come from the era when you had an ambassador car, you could fix that car in the carburetor and clean it anywhere in the road, any place in the country. And it started and you sort of moved again. You knew what was under the hood. Today, the same four wheels and what is there under the hood, it is so complex that you do not understand. And there are very specialized people who can fix those. So I think the same thing deals with that we are moving into a world where there is a lot of new risks emerging into the system. And I'm not even talking about a COVID-19 type of a risk that we need to be fully prepared for. So this is what I call why a structured risk management is so critical, because the identification of these risks in a structured manner and responding to them in a very structured process and evaluating as to what are the critical paths that you need to adopt from a risk mitigation plan can only be done not on an intuitive basis, but on a very structured, very well-driven process with very clear metrics in terms of how you want to deal with and what are those elements where you come to a point where you need to sort of raise the alarm bells and sort of put in special forces or special attention into those elements of risks that are building into your organization or your system. So I would say that intuitiveness is certainly good. It certainly helps you, but I think a structured risk management process is absolutely critical.
So last couple of questions. You've obviously been kind enough to be part of the risk task force trying to build out the risk code. How would you define success for this initiative? And somewhat related question, do you think there's enough talent today in the Indian corporate world to truly be able to embrace some of the advanced risk management frameworks, recommendations that this code is trying to come up with?
Well, firstly, on the risk management task force, I think this is very timely and it sort of is so topical, principally because we are facing this as we speak on the elements of risk, and it is something that is uppermost in almost everyone's mind as to how do you deal with that. So, what I believe that would be the most important thing that this task force can present to its constituents or constituencies or stakeholders is the model that how do you develop the ecosystem around the organization that we are involved with in terms of the risk processes, structured risk resolutions, identification of risks, risk owners, and all elements that are part and parcel of this aspect of this four-letter word. And I think this while we used to sort of look at profitability and so many other factors as an important piece, the identification of risks, as I said, become almost like the beginning of how you build a more robust organization. So this will probably what we are doing in the risk task force is not a prescription. It is not supposed to give a certain medicine or a prescription for what ailments the organizations are facing today, but it is an awareness that you are creating of why it is so important for organizations to develop platforms where you can deal with this aspect of risk in every organization. The element of how you sort of create that environment, is something which is very important. But this is also in terms of an evolution. As to you've got to move forward with this. It needs to be a forward-looking model that people can adapt to this model and modify it as we sort of move from where we are today to where we will probably be a few years from now. So we would sort of be successful if we are building that kind of awareness system. In terms of the whether the talent pool is available or not, I think there is, in some sectors, there is a reasonable amount of talent, but building talent pool around this is also an equally important task. Today, we do not have many institutions which specialize in this. I also feel that in our own regulatory system, not just in the companies, but in our regulatory systems, in the regulatory architecture itself, we go all the way up. That is there adequate skill sets? Are there adequate skill sets there? Well, there may be some today, but do they constantly need to hone their skills as they move along and as markets evolve? We should never believe that we are fully knowledgeable about everything. So I think from as far as regulators, board members, the leadership, down to the middle management and all the other people, the people who really deal with the risks in the front line on a day-to-day basis, I think the developing and honing their skills is an important aspect of how strong and what kind of risk mitigants that we'll build over a period of time. So I think that task of what you are undertaking, GRMI in partnership with FICCI, this is just the beginning, I believe. This is first of those initiatives that I think need to be compounded and need to be multiplied to be able to build a better and an effective structured risk management infrastructure across businesses.
Thank you so much, sir. Any closing remarks from you in terms of young risk professionals? What makes a successful one?
I think for youngsters who are looking at a career in elements of risks, and I think it's all businesses have some elements or the other, but even if it's some degree of specialization that is there in this field, I believe that this is one of the most exciting areas because the modeling of where the new risks are going to emerge and how we build mitigants and how we're going to create structures around it, what are the new kind of emerging risks that will be developing. I would say that this is one of the most exciting possibilities of a professional career that any youngster would be pursuing. And this would be, in my view, one of the most rewarding careers as well, because people would be wanting to reward individuals who have the necessary skills in identifying the risks and providing solutions for mitigating those risks as well. So I would definitely encourage a lot of youngsters to look at this field and certainly look at it an area of high growth from here and great potential for their own respective futures.
Thank you once again, sir, for your time. Look forward to our continued engagement with you, both on task force and similar subsequent sessions.
All the very best to you and all your colleagues at GRMI and FICCI.
Thank you so much, sir.